Millionaire CEO married a poor girl for his father's dying wish, but fate had other plans. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main characters. The story begins on a quiet afternoon in New York City, inside the private room of Street Clare Hospital. The steady beeping of a heart monitor echoed in the silence. Ethan Cole, a 32-year-old millionaire CEO, stood at the bedside of his dying father. His father's hand trembled as he gripped Ethan's fingers, his voice barely a whisper. "Promise me one thing. Marry her, Ethan. She is kind. She made my last months feel like life again." Ethan followed his father's gaze to Leah Tran, the young nurse standing near the door, plain uniform, gentle eyes, and exhaustion written all over her face. When his father's breathing faded into stillness, Ethan felt his world collapse into a quiet void. He buried his father 2 days later beneath the white oaks on the family estate. Rain streaked across his umbrella as mourners drifted away, but Leah stayed behind, holding a single white lily. "You gave him peace," Ethan said, his voice flat but sincere. "That is something money cannot buy." She nodded softly. "He was a good man." He looked at her then, really looked, and saw the kindness his father must have seen. Later that night, in his father's study, Ethan stared at the old man's final letter. It was short, handwritten in shaky ink. "Love is not inherited, Ethan, it is chosen. Find someone who reminds you that you are human." Ethan exhaled sharply and closed the letter. His company was in chaos, the board waiting for him to return, the press feeding on rumors. He needed order. He needed closure. And if honoring his father's dying wish could silence the noise, then so be it. The next morning, Leah found him waiting outside the hospital entrance. The drizzle clung to his dark suit, his expression unreadable. "Miss Tran," he said, his voice low, steady, practiced. "I have a proposal. Marry me." She froze, thinking she had misheard him. "What did you just say?" "This is not about romance," he continued, eyes hard as glass. "It is about a promise. My father wanted this. We will make it official for 6 months. You will receive financial support, and when it is over, you can walk away free." Her mouth went dry. "You are serious?" He nodded once. "Completely. Think of it as a contract." For a moment, the world went silent except for the sound of rain tapping against the pavement. Leah clutched her worn messenger bag tighter. Her mother's medical bills were stacked on the kitchen counter back home, each one stamped overdue. 6 months of pretending could save her mother's life. Her breath trembled as she whispered, "If this is what he wanted, then yes." Ethan opened a small velvet box and placed it on the table between them. Inside was a simple gold ring, no diamonds, no sparkle, just quiet weight. "This belonged to my mother," he said. "She wore it until the day she died. My father kept it for whoever would stand beside me." Leah's fingers hovered above the ring. Her reflection glimmered faintly in the polished surface. She had never imagined her name and the word marriage would exist in the same sentence, much less with a man like him. Yet here she was agreeing to a wedding born out of grief and obligation. That evening, under the muted lights of a courthouse downtown, Ethan Cole and Leah Tran signed their names on a marriage certificate. No music, no flowers, no guests, just 2 signatures binding 2 lonely lives together in silence. As they stepped outside, the rain had stopped. Leah looked up at the cloudy sky and whispered to herself, "Maybe this is what fate had planned all along." Ethan turned to her briefly, unreadable as ever. "Let us just get through this, Miss Tran. 6 months, no complications." But fate, quiet, patient, and cruelly poetic, had already begun to write something neither of them expected. The next morning, the courthouse felt colder than it should have. Ethan Cole signed his name with the precision of a man who had built an empire on order and control. Across from him, Leah Tran held the pen with both hands, her fingers trembling slightly. The marriage license lay between them like a bridge built from silence. When it was done, the clerk stamped the papers and said softly, "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Cole." No one clapped. No music played. Ethan handed her a folded document typed neatly, sealed with the Cole Group emblem. "Read it carefully," he said. "These are the terms." Leah opened it and scanned the lines. her eyes moving slowly. Clause 1. No emotional involvement. Clause 2. Maintain public appearance when required. Clause 3. Respect privacy and keep all matters confidential. At the bottom, there was a signature line waiting for her name. Her voice wavered. Is this really necessary? Ethan's expression did not change. My world runs on agreements, Miss Tran. Feelings do not survive in boardrooms. She hesitated, then signed. The sound of the pen scratching the paper felt louder than the rain outside. For a moment, she thought of her mother's face in that dim hospital room, pale under fluorescent lights. If this was what it took to keep her alive, then so be it. That afternoon, a black car waited for her outside her small apartment. 2 assistants loaded her modest suitcase while she stood by the curb, clutching her old phone and a framed photo of her mother. The ride to the coal estate took an hour, winding through iron gates and manicured lawns. When the car stopped, the mansion rose before her, massive, elegant, and distant. She had never seen so much marble and silence in one place. Inside, a woman in a sleek black suit greeted her. "Welcome, Mrs. Cole," she said politely, though her eyes betrayed surprise. Ethan appeared a moment later, his tone professional. "This is your room. We will attend a charity event in 2 weeks. Until then, stay discreet." Leah nodded. "Of course." As he turned to leave, she asked quietly, "Why me? Out of all the people your father could have trusted, why me?" Ethan paused at the doorway. "Because you cared when you had nothing to gain. That is rare." Then he walked away, leaving her alone in a room larger than her entire apartment. That night, Leah sat by the window, staring at the glittering city lights in the distance. Somewhere out there, people were falling in love, laughing over dinners, living lives that made sense. She traced the edge of her wedding ring, the simple gold band that once belonged to his mother. It felt heavy, not because of its weight, but because of what it meant. 6 months of pretending, 6 months of being someone she was not. Down the hall, Ethan stood in his late father's study, the smell of old books and cigar smoke still clinging to the air. He opened the same letter again, reading the words until they blurred. Love is not inherited. It is chosen. He closed the drawer and stared at the marriage contract lying beside the letter. 2 documents, side by side, one born from love, the other from duty. For the first time, Ethan wondered which of the 2 would last longer. The next 2 weeks passed like a dream that did not know whether it wanted to be sweet or cruel. Every morning, Leah Tran woke to the sound of footsteps in the hall and the faint hum of the house staff already at work. A maid named Clara brought her breakfast on a silver tray and politely reminded her of the lessons scheduled for the day table manners, small talk, and the art of walking in heels that cost more than her rent used to be. Ethan Cole had arranged everything. A stylist arrived each afternoon with elegant dresses and taught her which fork belonged to which course. In front of the mirror, Leah practiced her smile until it no longer looked nervous. Still, she knew she did not belong in that reflection, the pearls, the soft curls, the faint scent of expensive perfume. Underneath it all was still the nurse who used to work night shifts and sneak cups of instant coffee during breaks. Sometimes, Ethan observed her from the doorway, his expression unreadable. He corrected her posture, adjusted her grip on a wine glass, or reminded her to keep her answers short and polite. It was training, not tenderness, and yet there were moments when his tone softened, almost against his will. Once, when she tripped during a lesson, he caught her by the arm. "Steady," he said quietly, his hand lingering for just a second too long. Their eyes met, and neither spoke. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat. "We have a reputation to protect. Try again." At night, Leah wrote in a small notebook she kept hidden in her drawer. She listed the things she missed: the smell of disinfectant at the hospital, her mother's laughter, the sound of rain against her old window. Here, even the rain seemed different, colder, filtered through glass and chandeliers. She often wondered what Ethan missed, if he missed anything at all. One afternoon, she found him in the garden, standing beside his father's favorite rosebush. He wore no suit, just a white shirt rolled at the sleeves. The sight surprised her. She hesitated before asking, "Do you ever take a day off?" He looked up, faint amusement in his eyes. "A day off from what?" "From being you," she said. "From being the man everyone expects you to be." For the first time, he smiled, small, genuine, almost shy. "Maybe I do not know how anymore." And, later that evening, The two of them practiced introductions for the upcoming charity gala. He instructed her on which guests to greet first, which to avoid, and how to stand when photographers appeared. But when she accidentally spilled a glass of water on herself, Ethan did something unexpected. He laughed, not a cold, polite laugh, but real laughter that filled the empty dining hall. Leah blinked at him, startled, then began to laugh too. For a brief moment, the walls of the mansion did not feel so heavy. As the night settled in, she placed the wedding ring on the nightstand and whispered, "I will survive this, Mom. I promise." Downstairs, Ethan stood alone in the study, replaying the sound of her laughter in his head. It had been years since that house had heard anything like it. For the first time since the funeral, Ethan Cole felt something shift quietly inside him, something he had spent a lifetime trying to forget. The night of the charity gala arrived faster than either of them expected. The Cole Foundation had hosted this event every year in honor of Ethan's late mother, and this would be his first time attending without his father. The mansion was alive with movement stylists, photographers, and event planners rushing through the halls. Leah stood before the mirror in a silver gown that shimmered softly under the light. Her hair was pinned in loose waves, her lips the faint shade of rose. For a moment, even she did not recognize herself. When Ethan entered the room, dressed in a black tuxedo, he stopped for a heartbeat. He did not speak, but something in his gaze softened. "You look ready," he said finally. Leah smiled nervously. "That is not the same as saying I look beautiful." He gave the faintest hint of a smirk. "It would be unprofessional to say that, Mrs. Cole." The car ride to the city was silent except for the rain tapping gently against the windows. Outside, the world gleamed in reflections, glass towers, wet streets, the rhythm of tires slicing through puddles. Leah's hands rested on her lap, the gold wedding ring glinting under the dim light. She whispered to herself, "Just smile, stand tall, and breathe." Ethan turned slightly. "You will do fine. Remember, no one here needs to know the truth." When they entered the ballroom, the sound of chatter and string music filled the air. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen stars, and the scent of expensive perfume mingled with champagne. Cameras flashed as they stepped onto the red carpet laid across the marble floor. Reporters called his name, microphones rising like a tide. Ethan's hand brushed hers, guiding her forward firm, steady, practiced. "Stay close," he murmured. The first few minutes went smoothly. Leah greeted board members and donors, repeating the lines she had practiced. "It is an honor to be here. The foundation means so much to the community. Thank you for your generosity." Her voice was calm, graceful, even confident. But then, a reporter in a red blazer stepped closer, her smile sharp. "Mrs. Cole," she said, "forgive me, but some people are saying your marriage was rather sudden. Care to comment on that?" The question hit like a quiet explosion. The crowd around them seemed to hush. Leah's pulse quickened, her throat dry. She could feel the camera lights burning against her skin. Ethan tensed beside her, ready to step in, but she raised a hand slightly. She wanted to speak. With a steady breath, she said, "It was sudden. Life does not always give us time to plan love or loss. But I am grateful, because this man beside me kept his father's heart alive by believing in what he stood for." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, the reporter smiled awkwardly and lowered her microphone. The room softened, and people began to clap politely. Ethan turned to look at Leah, something close to pride flickering in his eyes. "Well done," he said quietly. "You handled that better than I could have." She exhaled, trembling slightly. "I just told the truth." As the evening continued, Ethan found himself watching her more than he watched the crowd. She laughed with guests, spoke with warmth, and never once looked out of place. When the orchestra played a slow waltz, he extended his hand toward her. "Shall we?" he asked. Her eyes widened. "Is that in the contract too?" He smiled faintly. "Consider it a clause I forgot to include." They danced under the golden light, their steps hesitant at first, then slowly in rhythm. For those few minutes, the whispers, the cameras, and the contract disappeared. There was only the quiet sound of a promise neither of them had made but both had begun to feel. The gala had ended hours ago, but the echo of applause still lingered in Leah's ears. She stood on the balcony of the mansion, barefoot now, the city lights flickering in the distance. Her silver gown shimmered faintly under the moonlight. Behind her, the sound of slow footsteps approached. Ethan Cole stepped out, jacket undone, bow tie hanging loose. He leaned against the railing beside her, the chill of the night air wrapping around them both. "You handled tonight with grace," he said quietly. Leah smiled faintly. "Thank you. I almost fainted when that reporter asked me about our marriage." "You did better than most executives I know," he replied. "You turned pressure into poise." She glanced at him, catching a softer tone in his voice. "That sounds like a compliment." "It is," he admitted. "Do not let it go to your head." And for a moment, silence settled between them, comfortable, unforced. The city below glowed like a field of stars. Leah took a deep breath and whispered, "Your father would be proud of you." Ethan turned slightly, his gaze fixed on the skyline. "You think so?" "I know so," she said. "He raised a man who keeps his word." His jaw tightened. "Keeping my word does not mean I understand love. I have failed at that part." Leah looked down at her hands, twisting the wedding ring gently. "Maybe love is not something to understand. Maybe it is something to practice." He studied her face for a long second before looking away. "You are not what I expected," he murmured. "And what did you expect? A woman who would do this for money or comfort or status. But you keep surprising me." She smiled softly. "Maybe you should expect less and listen more." The sound of distant thunder rolled across the sky. Rain began to fall, gentle at first, then heavier. Leah turned to go inside, but Ethan caught her wrist. "You will get drenched," she said, laughing as the rain soaked through her hair. "So will you," he answered, his voice low. For a heartbeat, they stood there, two strangers tied by a promise neither fully understood. When the storm grew colder, Ethan finally guided her back inside. They stopped in the grand hallway, water dripping from their clothes, laughter still caught between them. Clara, the housekeeper, appeared with towels, but Ethan waved her off. "It is fine," he said, his tone uncharacteristically gentle. "We will handle it." Later that night, Leah sat by the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, her hair still damp. Ethan poured 2 glasses of tea and handed one to her. Neither spoke for a while. Then she asked, "Do you ever miss your mother?" He nodded slowly. "Every day. She had this way of making silence feel safe. My father never learned that." Leah's eyes softened. "Maybe that is why he wanted you to find someone who could." He looked at her across the flickering firelight. Something in his expression shifted, something unspoken but real. "Good night, Leah," he said finally, standing up. She watched him leave, her heart beating faster than it should. When the door closed, she whispered into the empty room, "Good night, Mr. Cole." And though the house was as vast and quiet as ever, it no longer felt entirely lonely. Somewhere deep within its walls, something had begun to thaw. The days after the gala moved quietly, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Ethan Cole had returned to work, diving into meetings and board reports with his usual precision. But the people around him noticed something different. His voice had softened, his temper shorter to rise but quicker to calm. When he came home each evening, the mansion no longer felt like a museum. There was laughter now, faint but real, echoing down the marble halls. Leah Tran spent her mornings helping the staff prepare donations for the foundation's community clinic. She often slipped away to visit the nurses there, rolling up her sleeves to help with patients. When Ethan found out, he was not angry, just confused. "You do not have to do that anymore," he said one evening as they sat in the garden. "I know," she replied, folding bandages neatly into a box. "But helping people is not something I stopped doing because of a new address." He looked at her then, realizing she meant every word. Later that night, while reviewing documents in his study, Ethan came across an article about the foundation's latest donation drive. The photo showed Leah smiling with a group of children, sunlight catching her hair, joy radiating from her face. For reasons he could not explain, he stared at that picture longer than he should have. The next weekend, Ethan took her along to a business dinner at the Riverside Hotel. It was supposed to be simple smiles, polite conversation, nothing more. But as soon as they walked in, all eyes turned toward them. Ethan's partners whispered, surprised by the change in his demeanor. When one of them made a careless remark about charity cases making good wives, Leah froze. Before she could react, Ethan stood up, his tone calm but sharp. "Be careful with your words," he said. "Some people earn dignity without needing $1 to prove it." The table fell silent. On the drive home, Leah sat quietly, watching the city lights blur past the window. "You did not have to defend me," she said softly. "I was not defending you," he replied, eyes still on the road. "I was defending the truth." But she could hear the change in his voice. the flicker of warmth hidden beneath control. That night, the mansion was unusually still. Ethan walked past her room, hesitated, then knocked gently. "Come in," she said, startled. He stepped inside, holding a small box. "This was my father's," he said, opening it to reveal a pocket watch, old but beautifully kept. "He carried it through every storm of his life. I think he would have wanted you to have it." Leah touched it carefully, her voice trembling. "I cannot accept this." "Yes, you can," Ethan said. "You already carry more of him than I ever did." When he left, Leah sat on the edge of her bed, the watch resting in her hands. It ticked softly, steady and alive, a heartbeat from another time. She looked toward the closed door and whispered, "Why are you doing this to me?" Outside, Ethan leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. He did not have an answer. The next morning, a new article about their perfect marriage spread across social media, full of glossy photos and speculation. Leah saw it while eating breakfast, her hands tightening around the phone. Somewhere between duty and affection, the line had begun to blur and neither of them knew where it would lead. By early autumn, the illusion of calm had begun to crack. The mansion that once felt safe was suddenly filled with whispers, footsteps, and the quiet hum of tension that never went away. Ethan Cole's cousin, Veronica, had returned from Europe under the pretense of family business. Ugh. She smiled too easily. Her perfume lingered too long, and her eyes held the kind of curiosity that was never innocent. At first, Leah tried to be polite. Veronica complimented her dress, asked about her background, and then, with a tilt of her head, said, "You must be very persuasive to capture Ethan's attention so quickly." Leah smiled gently, refusing to take the bait. Kindness tends to do that to people. But Veronica was not done. She had grown up watching Ethan inherit everything she wanted, the company, the estate, the name. Now, seeing him with a wife who came from nothing only deepened her resentment. 2 days later, Veronica invited Leah for tea in the sunroom. They sat beneath tall windows as rain tapped softly against the glass. Veronica poured tea, her movements elegant and deliberate. "I found something interesting," she said casually, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were copies of the marriage contract, every clause, every signature. Leah's breath caught. "Where did you get this?" "Oh, it was left in a drawer in Ethan's study," Veronica said, her smile sharp. "I suppose he trusted the wrong people." Leah pushed the folder back, her hands trembling. "This means nothing." "Oh, but it does," Veronica replied. "Imagine what would happen if the press discovered that your marriage is nothing but a performance." Her words hung in the air like smoke. "You think you can threaten me?" Leah asked, standing up. "I think I can remind you of your place," Veronica said sweetly. "And it is not beside Ethan Cole." That evening, Leah confronted Ethan in his office. He was staring at his laptop when she burst in, holding the folder. "Why did you not destroy this?" she demanded. "You promised discretion." He looked up, surprised. "Where did you get that?" "Your cousin," she said bitterly. "She knows everything." Ethan's expression hardened. "Veronica does not control me." "But she can destroy you," Leah said quietly. "And she will, if you do not stop her." Before Ethan could answer, his phone buzzed. Dozens of alerts filled the screen. The contract had been leaked online. Within minutes, news outlets began to report, "Billionaire's marriage revealed as business arrangement." Ethan's face turned pale. Leah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. By morning, paparazzi swarmed outside the mansion gates. Reporters shouted her name, cameras flashing as she stepped outside. Ethan's advisors arrived in black cars, warning him of the board's anger and potential suspension. Veronica stayed silent, hiding behind sympathetic smiles. The headlines painted Leah as a gold digger and Ethan as a fraud. That night, Leah packed her suitcase. When Ethan found her by the doorway, she did not look at him. "I was supposed to help you keep your father's promise," she said softly. "Now I have ruined everything." He took a step forward. "You have not ruined anything." She shook her head. "I made you lose everything that mattered." Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. "This was never supposed to be real, Ethan. Maybe it is better if we both remember that." She left the gold ring on the table beside the pocket watch he had given her. The door closed behind her with a quiet click. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole felt the weight of silence not as comfort, but as loss. The next few weeks felt like winter had arrived too early. Ethan Cole's world, once perfectly controlled, had fallen into chaos. The board of directors had suspended him from his position as CEO, citing ethical misconduct and public image concerns. Veronica had taken temporary control of the company, smiling for the cameras as she promised a new direction for the Cole legacy. Reporters hounded Ethan's every move, waiting for a quote, a statement, or a breakdown. But he said nothing. Inside the now quiet mansion, Ethan sat in his late father's study surrounded by silence and dust. On the desk lay the same pocket watch he had given to Leah. He picked it up, running his thumb along the engraved initials. The watch had stopped ticking the tiny gears frozen at the exact hour she had left. He whispered into the emptiness, "You were right, father. Love is chosen. And I chose too late." Meanwhile, Leah had returned to her small apartment on the edge of the city. The reporters eventually stopped knocking, and life settled back into something resembling normal. She went back to working part-time at the hospital and spent her evenings caring for her recovering mother. But every time she passed a newspaper stand or heard a news anchor mention the Cole family, her chest tightened. She missed him more than she wanted to admit. One evening, while preparing dinner, the television flickered to a live broadcast. It was the annual Cole Foundation Memorial event, now hosted by Veronica. Ethan was not expected to attend, but as the cameras panned across the stage, there he was standing at the podium. No security, no introduction, just quiet determination. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Before you hear from anyone else tonight, there is something I need to say." And the crowd fell silent, confused but attentive. He continued, "Months ago, I made a decision to honor my father's dying wish. I married a woman not for love, but for duty. What began as an agreement became something far greater than I deserved." He paused, looking straight at the cameras. "That woman, Leah Tran, showed my father compassion when I could not. She gave him dignity, and she gave me a chance to become someone better. The fault was never hers. It was mine for believing I could keep love inside a contract." The audience murmured, flashes of cameras lighting the room. Ethan's voice softened. "I have lost my position, my reputation, and perhaps my fortune. But if I could ask for one thing back, it would be her forgiveness. Because for the first time in my life, I know what my father meant." He reached into his pocket and held up the golden wedding ring. This ring was never supposed to mean anything, but now it means everything. Ugh. The hall erupted in quiet applause, then louder, until even Veronica stood frozen, her expression unreadable. Across town, Leah stood motionless in front of the television, tears blurring her vision. Her mother touched her arm gently. "Go to him, sweetheart. Some promises are meant to be kept twice." That night, under the same rain that had once brought them together, Leah took a cab back to the Cole estate. The reporters were gone. The gates were open. Ethan was still standing in the empty ballroom. The lights dimmed, his speech papers scattered across the floor. When he looked up and saw her, the world seemed to still. Leah stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You could have just called." Ethan smiled, his eyes glistening. "I needed the whole world to know before you did." She laughed softly through her tears. "Then maybe the world can be forgiven for once." And when she reached out, he took her hand as if it was the only truth left worth holding. The ballroom was quiet now, the storm outside fading into a soft drizzle. Leah stood in front of Ethan, her dress damp from the rain, her hair clinging to her face. Neither of them spoke for a moment, as if words might shatter the fragile air between them. The golden ring gleamed faintly in his hand, still warm from the spotlight of his confession. Ethan broke the silence first. "You did not have to come back." Leah smiled faintly. "You did not have to tell the world the truth. I owed it to you," he said quietly, "and to my father, but mostly to myself." He took a step closer. "You once told me that love is something we practice. I think I finally understand what that means." She looked at him for a long time, the weight of everything they had endured hanging between them. "When I left," she whispered, "I told myself I would never forgive you for turning my life into a story for the tabloids." Ethan's voice broke slightly. "And now? Now I think the story was never about the scandal. It was about learning how to tell the truth." He exhaled slowly, setting the ring on the palm of her hand. "This started as a contract. But I want to start again, no clauses, no conditions." Leah's eyes filled with tears. "And what would this new contract say?" Ethan smiled softly. "Only one line. I will love you the way my father wanted me to love, with choice, not obligation." Outside, thunder rumbled faintly, but the rain had turned gentle again, washing the city clean. Leah slipped the ring onto her finger, her hand trembling. Then she looked up and said, "You do not need a contract to prove it, Ethan. Just time. Time to do it right." He reached for her hand, and when their fingers touched, it felt like the final piece of a puzzle sliding into place. In the weeks that followed, the chaos around the Cole family began to fade. Veronica resigned from the board, her plans undone by Ethan's public redemption. The foundation's donations doubled after his heartfelt speech, and the hospital where Leah worked received new funding under her name. When reporters asked if she would return to her nursing career, Leah simply smiled and said, "Helping people never stopped being my job." One crisp morning, they returned to the quiet cemetery where everything had begun. Ethan placed fresh lilies on his father's grave and whispered, "I kept my promise, Dad, but she kept me honest." Leah knelt beside him, tracing the carved name with gentle fingers. "He would be proud of you." Ethan turned to her and said, "No, he would be proud of us." As they walked back toward the car, the first sunlight of spring broke through the clouds. Ethan opened the door for her, then paused, watching the light fall across her face. "Do you ever think fate plans these things?" he asked. Leah laughed softly. "Maybe, but I like to think we wrote this one ourselves." He smiled, taking her hand once more. "No more pretending?" he asked. She shook her head. "No more pretending." The car drove away slowly, leaving the old gravestones behind. The gold ring on her finger caught the sunlight, and for the first time since that hospital room months ago, Leah felt at peace. The story that began with a dying man's wish had become something stronger, a promise reborn, not on paper, but in the quiet certainty of two hearts choosing each other for real. And in that simple, steady truth, their love finally became what it was always meant to be: free, honest, and alive.